Hello and welcome to my lab. In this episode we'll be wiring the Skittle sorting machine. I've already completed the electronics enclosures, so now all they need to do is be put on the Skittle sorter and wired up. There's a lot to go over, so I think we'll just explain it as we go. So let's just jump into it. Here's the power supply enclosure, which fits on the back of the Skittle sorter. First I'm going to put the power supply in the bottom. Once that's done, I'm going to add the power cable here. I'll put this in through the back. Now it connects in through a Molex connector, but I'm going to have to terminate these wires first and then put them in the Molex connector. The ground pin goes through a spade connector, but these other two, the line and the neutral, they have to be crimped. The way that you crimp these is that you take one of these little pins that come in kind of like a belt fed scenario, just cut one off, and then the wire fits right in. After that, I have a special tool that will crimp the metal around into the wire. Once that's done, the pin will just slide into the plastic connector that you see here, and it clicks in so that it doesn't come back out. And here I'm just going to crimp a regular spade connector onto the ground. Here's the front electronics enclosure. I've designed it with a slot so that the microcontroller board can just slide right in. There's a hole in the bottom for the USB to plug in, and then it's actually retained by the lid. Once the lid is on, the microcontroller board won't slide out. Then, just as we talked about last time, there's room in the lid for the screen and the encoder. I still have one more thing to do to the feed bowl before I can screw it down. I have to add the color sensor. The color sensor is going to just slide right into this slot, and then the tube fits right over it. Now I can put it back on, slides right into place, and you can see the tube goes right down into the Skittle diverter. Now I'll screw it all down and it's ready to go. Now to attach the electrical enclosures. The nuts that slide into the slots of the extruded aluminum frame automatically align the enclosures. Alright, now we have a bunch of wires to tidy up. Many of them can be bundled together, and I like to use electrical tape to do that. I'll use a gray electrical tape here because it looks nice. You should always have just a bunch of different colors of electrical tape, it comes in really handy. Now that they're all bundled together, I can run them as one. So I will run them up and across this beam, zip tie them down, and it'll look quite tidy. Now the color sensor needs to go to the front enclosure. After that, I'm going to run a bundle of cables between the two enclosures to provide power and communication between the two. Next, I will attach the feed wheel motor power cables, and then I will bundle them together with the feedback wires using the same gray tape as I did last time. Now we have a big mess of wires in the back enclosure, but let's start with the output of the power supply. I've already crimped and made up this connector here. This contains the 5 volts that will go to the control boards and the 24 volts to power the motors. So this bundle of wires goes to the front enclosure. These belong to the feed wheel motor and the rest belong to the diverter motor. Now it's time to wire the O-drive. I'll start with the motor power cables. Then I will put it into place to make sure it's all going to fit. At this point I realize it's going to be a pain to put these wires in if the O-drive's still in there, so I go ahead and take it back out. Now in order to control the motors properly, the O-drive is going to have to be able to not only add energy to the motors, but also remove energy from the motors. In order to do that, it actually wastes the energy through a power resistor. I don't have a power resistor, so I'm going to have to make one. That's actually very easy to do using nichrome wire. If I just wrap a couple of lengths of this around, I'll get a certain ohm resistor and it will have a good power rating. I don't expect this to get hot because we won't actually be wasting much power through it. I've gone ahead and wired the rest of the signals. I'll label those here for your convenience. Now onto the front. Here we have that cable of wires coming from the O-drive, and this is of course the color sensor here. For this project here I'm using a Cypress PSOC microcontroller. This is my go-to microcontroller these days because the IDE is just really good. In fact, with the existence of this microcontroller, I'm not really sure why people use Arduinos anymore for prototyping. Anyway, I've trimmed these wires back in preparation to land them, but before I do that, we need to prepare the lid. I need to attach the display to the top and pop in the encoder on the bottom. Then I will just need to solder on the power and communication wires. Here it is all wired up, and as last time, I labeled everything for your convenience. Then I will just stuff it all in like a turkey. Now we just need to program the microcontrollers, and next time we can try out the Skittle sorter. But until then, I need to continue working on my other important experiments.